Welcome to Music Crush, a new music podcast hosted by Flute New Music Consortium. I'm Elizabeth Robinson.
And I'm Nicole Reiner. If you like the show, please rate and review it on the platforms wherever you listen to podcasts, particularly on Apple Podcasts. It really helps people find us and grow the show. And of course, you can learn more about Flute New Music Consortium at flutenewmusicconsortium.com.
While standing in the corner of a crowded room of flutists, Dianna Link heard her music played for the first time and decided right there that she was a composer. Link writes for everything from intimate chamber works to expansive, large ensemble works. She has collaborated with numerous musicians and ensembles, including the Colorado Symphony, the Denver Young Artist Orchestra, Evalis String Quartet, Noise, and Christina Jennings. Her music has been performed on Colorado Public Radio, the National Flute Association Convention, CU Faculty Tuesday Music Series, and Pendulum New Music. She holds a Bachelor of Music in Composition from the University of Colorado, Boulder College of Music, where she studied with Annika Socolofsky, Jeff Nitsch, Daniel Kellogg, and former FNMC commissioned composer Carter Pan. She also won the FNMC Composition Competition in 2023 with her piece for flute and piano, Old as Time. Welcome to Music Crush, Dianna.
Hello.
So, Dianna, tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your musical background and what you're up to right now.
Yeah, so I'm a composer, a flutist, a baker, and a tortoise mom. I live in Littleton, Colorado. Lately, I've really been working on myself. I'm writing a viola piece, so that's really cool. And my musical background, I've always done music in my life, but I've always done it my own way. I didn't really grow up having a bunch of formal training like a bunch of my peers, but I did it everywhere I went. You know, I did 18 musicals as a kid, and I played flute in band and jazz band, and I played saxophone for a while in jazz band. And then I went to school for composition at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I got a degree in composition.
So how did you switch from flute to, well, not switch, you're still playing flute, but how did you get into composing?
I feel like it was an accident. I was in high school and I used to host these flute parties for my friends in high school, like for Christmas. And I started arranging music for us to play at the Christmas party. And I had just started taking flute lessons for the first time, like my junior year of high school. And I arranged Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas for flute quartet. And I was a really bad flute student. I would make up my own versions of the pieces and alter it and play it the way I wanted it to go. And I would show my flute teacher pieces that I was working on and arrangements instead of actually playing flute and what I was supposed to be practicing. And anyway, my junior year of high school, I wrote a flute quartet, and that was my first real piece, and I just never stopped.
So, can you tell us a little bit about Old as Time?
Yes, this is a very special piece to my heart. When I wrote this piece for my dear friend Claire Grunsbury, and we were both juniors in college in our undergrad, and she wanted me to write her a piece for her junior recital, and I was like, okay, let's do this. And the year before, I had taken a class on Russian folklore, studying just folklore in general, and one of the things we had talked about was how there's certain stories that keep on popping up throughout different cultures in the world. And one of those stories is Beauty and the Beast. I really connected with this story, not only just because I'm familiar with it, you know, the Disney cartoon, but in folklore, a lot of times the women portrayed in folklore don't have very much agency, and they're usually seen as weak or someone who needs to be saved or a villain. And I really like this story because she is the heroine and she has her own agency, and she's not the one in trouble, she's the one doing the saving. And that really connected with me. And so I decided to make the piece based off of that. And this was the last piece I had played right before the pandemic. So that was really special too. My friend never actually got to play it on her junior recital because of the pandemic, but luckily we had a preview performance literally like 3 days before everything shut down, and we got to have it played. One of the big things I wanted to do with this piece is, well, it's really special because each movement is based off of a different version of the story that's popped up. And I wanted to really highlight the vulnerabilities and the like humanness of Belle as the heroine, because I feel like a lot of times, especially in folklore, like those sort of things are glossed over. It's usually like way zoomed out. It's like this happened and then this happened and then this happened, but it's not really focusing on like what the person was feeling, what the person was going through. And so I really want to highlight those moments as it went through the piece and kind of tell the story of resilience and determination through the eyes of the character. I also really wanted to make the piece about her growth, and instead of like a trope in fairy tales a lot of times is the fairy tale is over when you get married, that fairy tale wedding happily ever after the end. That really bugs me because I don't think that your whole goal in life should have to be to go and get married. And like you can be successful and be a badass without having that as your one goal in life. And so it was really important to me to rewrite the ending. And in my version, she becomes a doctor and saves a grumpy old man's life because I want her, like, she saved herself and she's successful because of who she is and who she became, and not because it's not all wrapped up in her identity as a married woman. That was a really important thing for me because I just wanted this to be a piece about resilience and self-empowerment and building self-confidence.
So do you know if Claire has any does she have the piece up on the docket now that we're back and can perform again?
Oh, she's played it a couple times.
Okay.
We did a recording during the pandemic, and she came back to Colorado and played it at a few like house concerts. So she has played it, just not for the originally intended performance.
Right. Nice. That
Yeah.
must be the model recording that you turned in for the competition too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, she sounds beautiful. That's a great recording.
Thank you.
So you're graduated now.
Hmm.
What all have you been doing since you got out of school? And is that altering or informing your work as a composer at all?
Yeah, it's been a really wild ride, to be honest. I applied to grad schools and I got accepted. I got accepted into the University of Michigan and into Manus, but I decided not to go because it's just way too expensive, and I don't know if it's worth it to be $100,000 in debt for a music degree.
Oh.
So I've been doing what I've always been doing. I'm paving my own path. I'm doing it my own way, and it may not be the way that all of my peers have done it, but I'm doing what I want to do. I did a mentorship program through the Boulanger Initiative with Alex Gardner, and that was really really impactful on my life as a composer. She's been a really big influence and just really a rock with like self-confidence and encouragement, and someone to really look up to. I've also stayed in touch with Annika Socolofsky. She was a very influential mentor to me. I'm really thankful for those two ladies in particular in my life. I can't imagine what it'd be like without them. I also just graduated. I got an artist's diploma from the OAcademy. It's this brand new program. It's very new. It's like a 6-month online intensive meeting with all these different composers from around the world. And I'm still going on the little train that could. I think it's even harder. It's hard to find yourself in the world. And I'm really proud of myself for carving out my own little path. I mean, that's just always the way I feel like I've been. I've never really fit into a box.
That's I will include these programs that you referenced in the show notes. I've been curious about the Boulanger Initiative. I follow them on social media, and it looks like they're doing so many cool things. What would you recommend? Would you recommend other people get involved in certain ways? Or, I mean, besides this program that you did, are there other aspects to the Boulanger Initiative that listeners could explore?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the biggest thing that people could engage with is they have a database and a music consulting program where if you're trying to build a program or learn about different female composers, they have a lot of resources for that would help you further expand your knowledge.
Similar question about flute. What are you doing, if anything, on flute or saxophone or anything else these days? And again, as a performer, I'm always curious to talk to composers about how getting the instrument in their hands and playing affects the way that they compose, if you feel like there's any symbiosis there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start with that little tidbit. Recently, I just finished a string quartet and I bought a violin because I wanted to mess around with it. I'm terrible and I wouldn't call myself a violinist, but there really is something about like having the instrument, even if you don't know the capabilities of it, just having it in your hand so you can mess around with it and see what sounds it makes and see how your fingers feel. That's no different with flute. I mean, flute's my first instrument, so it's a little bit different there. There really is something about like physically having the instrument in your hand that affects the process of writing. In the string quartet I wrote, I had a lot of strumming, stuff like that, and that's just something like you just have to have it in your hand to try and mess with. You can't think about that conceptually in your head. I don't know how someone would do that. I feel like that would be so hard. But being able to have it in your hand and mess around with it, see what happens, that is a really informative experience. As for my flute playing, I've been on a journey. I went through a period right after I graduated of really feeling dejected and like trying to figure out my identity as a musician. Like sometimes I feel like in music school they make you feel like you have to fit into one box and you can only do one thing and that's all you can do. And so I felt like I wasn't a real flute player. I felt like an ugly duckling and I didn't belong with my flute friends. I mean, I did study with Christina and I was in the flute studio for my first 2 years, but I just got really sad and I didn't play for a year. I'm reclaiming my relationship with my instrument and I want to play the music that I want to play. I've been really having fun with, I want to learn Irish flute, so I've been listening to a lot of Irish traditional music and I've been trying to learn it by ear, trying to play along with it. And I've always been a big fan of jazz. So I'm trying to do the same thing with jazz. When I was in seventh grade, I wrote like this jazz flute solo and someone compared me to Jethro Tull. So I've been listening to Jethro Tull and, Herbie Mann and I just I want to play the music that I want to play and you know I feel like being in school like you feel like you always have to be perfect, you always have to be practicing, you always have to be doing what your teachers think you say you should be doing. And I'm creating this own identity for myself and embracing the things that I'm naturally drawn to. So that's been a really cool experience for me.
It's so inspiring.
Yeah. It sounds like one of the reoccurring threads in your worldview is being really open to experimentation. And I know in my own life, and it seems like in the lives of the students that I work with, the sort of challenging thing about experimentation is risking failure. Do you have a biggest regret or like a biggest failure in your musical career, and what did you learn from it?
Um, that's an interesting question. I feel like I would just go back to I feel like I failed myself by not believing in who I am and what I can be, and just letting so many other people get inside my head that I kind of forgot who I was and what I'm doing and where I'm going. And I feel like I really failed myself in that way because I found myself getting to the point where I didn't even know who I was anymore. But I'm so proud of myself because I've been working really, really hard on really being confident in who I am. I've been working through The Artist Way by Julia Cameron, and that's just been really eye-opening to me because I'm such a creative person. I've always been a creative person. But I'm really proud of myself for getting out there and trying new things and just being myself.
What do you think is the biggest challenge you're facing right now in your work as you look forward?
I think the biggest challenge is I kind of have like a wide open slate right now. I'm just working on personal projects, and that's both exciting and scary because it's exciting because I can do whatever I want. But it's scary because it's easier when you have like a commission or a project you're working on with someone else where like you have parameters and you have a deadline and you have just all these things that go along with the project. And so kind of just looking off into the abyss and having infinite possibilities, it's both super exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Valid.
Well, you talked about the structure that having a commission or a project with someone else can provide. And one of the things we've been really enjoying asking composers lately is what is a dream project or collaboration?
That's also a really interesting question. I've always been drawn to orchestra, and I've always been really obsessed with the piccolo. And actually, when I was 18, I orchestrated a piece for Gary Shocker, Piccolo Italiano. I wrote the orchestra part for it, and that was really cool. But I was played with the Colorado Symphony. But I'd like to write my own piccolo concerto. I think the piccolo is just underappreciated and gets like it's a scapegoat, and everybody just picks on it for no reason. It's actually a really beautiful instrument and deserves to get more love. So
How do you feel about that, Elizabeth?
I'd play it.
What's on your workbench right now?
I just started this big personal project and I'm super excited about it. It's called Red Ink Pages, and basically where the idea that where that came from was I was really thinking about, well, first of all, when I first started college, my professor liked to circle every single notation error with this red pen before he would ever look at a single note of my music. And it just really got to me because I hadn't really studied composition before. I had no idea what the rules were for notation. I had no idea how to use Finale or the music software or anything. And I felt like I was being penalized every single time I walked in, having to sit down for 15, 20 minutes and circle all of the little things that I didn't know were problems. And it just really got me thinking about music in general and the creation of music. And I feel like people have kind of gotten away, like they've gotten too wrapped up with being perfect and playing the notes exactly how they're written and making sure that they're written perfectly and it's published perfectly. I feel like just musicians in general have gotten too wrapped up in all of these things that don't actually matter for the music, because the score is not the music. The notation is not the music. The music it's a moment in time that you share with an audience and other performers. It's not anything that you can touch. It's something that you feel in your heart and in your bones and your soul, and if you miss it, then it's gone. It's I feel like people have made the score be the music, and that's not what it is. And so I'm gonna write a series of pieces for the red ink pages, and it's gonna be solo instrument pieces for my friends. And the whole idea behind it is to just share a moment of genuine connection and like celebrate the music for what it is and not focus on how it is written and what it looks like. And I want the scores to be all in red. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet because I don't think anyone would want to read my handwritten scores. I feel like that would not go over well. But we'll figure that out. Yeah, but I'm writing the first piece of that for my best friend who plays viola. She's having a master's recital at Eastman. So I'm writing her a really cool viola solo piece, and I'm really excited about it. And I think it's going to be really cool. And I'm also writing a piece for my friend commissioned me to write a piece for beginner clarinet for her dissertation. She's making a book of beginner clarinet pieces by living composers. That's been a fun project for me to work on too. There's so many parameters in it because it's for such a young player. It's kind of like a puzzle, like, oh, did I do this, or oh no, that violates this parameter. And so that's been a fun project too.
Sounds like some really interesting rules that you have to fit inside for some structure. Can we go back to the red ink pages?
Mhm.
So is there going to be some sense of flexibility in these solos, or moments where you ask the soloist to improvise or anything in order to get people off the page a little bit?
I don't know. That's a really interesting idea. I haven't really thought about that. I know that I want to have like a lot of fluidity within the piece and like not have it be super rigid. But I hadn't really thought about that before.
I mean, maybe, if they're all for individual people too, it could be
Mm-hmm.
working with each personality's, comfort zone in terms of what they would like to have more freedom on, Wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
like for me, actually, I would not be happy if you asked me to improvise, but I'd be very happy to come up with my own tempos in rubato or something. That sounds really exciting. So you were talking about, the score versus the performance, and that moment that you can't recreate,
Mm-hmm.
which I think it sounds so inspiring. It makes me want to go see more live music actually when you talk. What do you think about the difference between commercial recordings and live music?
I think that they're really different things for different purposes. Commercial recordings it's like a polished version of the work that you can enjoy at any time, and it's like the ideal version of it, because you can go back and edit it and like do all these different things that it makes it like it's not it makes it something unattainable in real time, which there's a time for that, when you're listening to something, it's nice to have it be what somebody imagined it to be. But there's something really special about a live performance too, where the imperfections add to the character of the piece and the moment. I remember my junior year of college, I wrote a string quartet, and one of my other friends also wrote a string quartet. And someone in the audience brought like a vase for somebody with flowers, and it fell over during my friend's performance in like a really quiet moment. So it made like this ding that like echoed. But in something like that, like you can't replicate that. It was at a random moment in the piece, there's so many things that went into that, but it, I don't know, kind of added to the piece. It didn't ruin it or anything. But like you can't get that back. That's a one-time thing. You had to be there. You just had to be there to experience that. Yeah, and every performance is different. Even if it's the same people performing, every performance is different.
Thank you for sharing that. That's interesting. It's interesting to think about, especially from the performer's perspective, because you spend so many years worrying about, I guess, those red ink moments, but in your playing instead of on the written page. This is the question we always like to close with. We always learn new things. Can you name 3 pieces you're listening to right now that you would like us to listen to?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll start with let's see. I've been listening to a lot of there's this band called Top House that I really like. It's kind of like a folksy band, but there's this piece called The Mountain Song. And I really, really like that. I live in Colorado and I love the mountains. And it just reminds me of this beautiful time hiking up the Rabbit Ears Pass and seeing this like vast valley of wildflowers. And I just love listening to that piece. And there's bands called Twisted Pine. And I really like a lot of their songs, but Come Along Jody, yeah, that's the one I've been really into. It's a really, really neat band. It's like pop meets bluegrass, but the thing that I really think is cool about it is there's a flute player in it, and she plays a lot of really badass solos in there. And it just, like, you wouldn't normally hear that in a group like that, but it just sounds so organic and sounds so cool, and I just love it so much. And I've also been listening to just the whole soundtrack from How to Train Your Dragon. I'm kind of a nerd, and I bought myself the full score. So I've been like watching the movie and watching the score, and because I've been listening to that score for years because it's just one of my favorites, and it's just really interesting to be like, oh, that's so much simpler than I thought it was in my head. Um, so yeah, those have been my favorites lately.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing those. Dianna, thank you for being so candid with us and so real in your answers. I think it's going to be really inspirational for our listeners to enjoy this interview. And thanks for spending a little time with us today.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Music Crush. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also support the podcast, read show notes, and learn more about FNMC by visiting www.flutenewmusicconsortium.com.